A mega church in Naples, Florida kicks out many of its members for racism. I'm JC Pilcher, and this is JCPC Apologetics. So for many of you guys, this is old news, and for others, this is probably news that is, for a first time for you. But yeah, it happened a long time ago now. And by a long time, I'm talking about in Twitter time, which means a few months. But there was this big explosion with this church called First Baptist Church in Naples. So the long and short of it is I've kind of held back on commenting on it because, one, it involved racism and the whole social justice movement. And so it's a thing that I have very strong opinions on, and it's something that is easy to get yourself in a lot of trouble with these days. And me, I didn't want to jump the gun on either side, so I was kind of quiet. But recently I came across a very thoughtful thread on Twitter from a man named John Harris, who has done a lot of good work that I've seen on Twitter. And he's had some very interesting points to be made about this. And so I'm going to read his thread. I asked his permission before I did this, to kind of give you an idea of what's happening. A lot of the people I know myself included, when I first heard about this, my initial reaction was to side with the church. And then as time went on, I started kind of getting concerned with the church. And what I think this will ultimately do is help us springboard into another subject. That is the subject of church discipline, which is very interesting. And I hope we'll get into that in the video as well. So let's dive right into John Harris's, not to be confused with Josh Harris, John Harris's thread. John Harris writes, First Baptist Church, Naples, is a large church in the Southern Baptist Convention boasting 10,000 attendees. Charles Colson used to attend the church, was recently called an anchor church for Florida Baptists by Ashley Clayton, who's the vice president of the cooperative program. Information has been brought to our attention about corruption involving First Baptist Church, Naples. The chairman of the Pastoral Search Committee was arrested in 2001 for racketeering conspiracy, according to the Naples Daily News. Apparently, his activity at the church has been consistent. In a strange turn of events this year, the senior pastor of 27 years was forced out last winter, and out of the 100 applications to fill his position, Marcus Hayes, who did not meet the minimum qualifications set forth by the search committee, was chosen by the committee. According to former members, Hayes would have changed the way small groups functioned, and several members were concerned he did not meet the minimum qualifications of 5 years of experience with the membership of a church over 1,200 members. Now I'm going to break reading the thread for a second to say, when I first read that, I was thinking, oh no, this is church drama at the highest level. Anyone who's been a part of a church, they kind of know what this is about. Oh, he's going to mess with the way that small groups operate. How dare he mess with our sacred calves? I've seen this so many times, and my initial reaction to the story was, oh, church, get over it. This is not a big deal. When you get a new pastor, he's your pastor. You need to accept the fact that he's not going to be the guy that just left. You got to accept the pastor for who he is and choose a pastor who's going to lead you wisely. And if you get hung up on something, get hung up on matters of doctrine, not on matters of how he's going to run a small group. And so, I was like, oh dear, I already see where this is going. But it kind of took a turn in a different way. The other thing I was a little bit about was the fact that he didn't fulfill the minimum qualifications. I feel like a lot of pastoral search committees have qualifications that are either unrealistic or unnecessary. Like, he had to have 5 years of, leading a church of 1,200 members or more. That kind of, what kind of a qualification is that? We have qualifications for elders laid out in scriptures. You can find that in Titus and 1 Timothy. The amount of years serving is not a qualification. The amount of years serving a big church, mega church, it's not a qualification. So, one thing I would say is, you guys, y'all waste y'all's time worrying about things that don't matter. What really matters is the lifestyle of the man that you're getting and his doctrine. It doesn't matter if he's led a church of 20 or 20,000. The doctrine and his life matter much, much more. But with that said, that's a little off the subject. Let's go ahead and continue along with this thread. Here's where I started to get a little bit concerned in seeing where this thing is really going. In addition, Hayes had made left-leaning social media posts in which he endorsed Eric Mason's woke church, Black Lives Matter, and retweeted a post from Democratic candidate Kamala Harris. Hayes also said that same-sex attraction was not a sin while speaking at Naples. The search committee treated Hayes' election as a formality that would result in his coronation. A glowing letter from J.D. Greer, president of the SBC, as well as a video commercial from Kevin Nizel, president of the North American Mission Board, were presented to the church. Again, I want to throw on the brakes right there and say that is when this whole situation flipped on its head for me. Because initially, I was thinking that the people who didn't vote for Marcus Hayes were either racist like they had been accused of, or they were in error of just being those old cranky church folks who don't want to change anything. But then when I read this, I saw that it was, again, the social justice beast trying to invade the church. And endorsing Eric Mason's book, The Woke Church. I don't know what this book is. I've heard people talk about it. And let's just say nothing I've ever heard read out of that book has ever been good. This is not really a Christian book. It's more of a Trojan horse, you might say, from what I've understood of it. And so, yeah, don't take my word on that one. You might have to check it out yourself, but because I haven't read the book. But everything I've heard from it is pretty bad. So that would be a reason for concern for me. In fact, if anybody endorsed that, I would never vote for them to be a pastor of any church. But secondly, he endorsed Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is, again, another anti-Christian group. Black Lives Matter survives by causing protest, by stirring up division, by, in some cases, there have been acts of terrorism, basically, performed by them. This is not a Christian group. Christians are to submit to the government, not go on protests and strikes and blocking roads and not allowing people to move about. This is anti-Christian. You shouldn't ever support this group, and I don't care if it's a black group, a white group, or any other group under the sun. It's not a matter of race. It's a matter of this is rebellion against the government, and rebellion against the government is rebellion against God. Romans is very clear. We are to submit to the governing authorities. And if you think America is bad, and certainly America is morally bankrupt, our government, but it's nothing like the many of the governments in our world today. In fact, I would say basically America is the best government left around, and it is not even comparable to the Roman Empire that Paul was living under when he wrote that. He was writing while underneath Nero, who would eventually kill him. He was telling people to pay taxes. Those taxes were turned around and used to persecute the church. So, yeah, the idea of supporting Black Lives Matter is not something any pastor should ever do. And again, I would never vote for a pastor who endorsed them. Or for that matter, I wouldn't endorse any pastor who comes to the stage saying you have to vote this way or that way. If you support the Democratic Party, you're supporting Satan's, party, basically. There is nothing in that party that isn't anti-Christian. And if you support the Republican Party, those guys, they cater to Christians, but when you look at their actions are not reflective of that. And more importantly, we're the church here. We transcend government, you might say, in the fact that, governments come, governments go, governments rise, governments fall. The church is always going to be here. And while we have the unique opportunity in America to work with to be able to vote and have some interaction in the government, and we're not being directly persecuted yet by the government, we should, that's fine, that's great, and we should do what we can to promote righteousness in our society through the government. But our primary concern is the church. And when a pastor is allying himself with political organizations, and you already see trouble with him becoming overly political. And again, I am a conservative when it comes politically speaking. But this is an error I see both in conservatives and liberals. First of all, I don't see how you call yourself a Christian and vote Democrat. It's just cognitive dissonance on the highest level. But when you see guys who are extremely political, like Robert Jeffries from a church in Dallas, that guy, he ceased to be a pastor and has become more of a politician. So when I see any pastor get too political, I start to get concerned that doctrine and the Word of God and being the church is going to fall on the back burner because the political goals are what ultimately matter. So yeah, this guy, I would never have voted for him on that point either. But lastly, of course, he retweeted a Kamala Harris at the time she was still running for president. And that's, again, totally unacceptable. She was all for abortion, child murder, because let's stop calling it abortion. It's what it is. It's child murder, child sacrifice. Any Christian who thinks that you can vote for that is, again, suffering from cognitive dissonance. They are not, they are trying to hold two things together that cannot be held together. The Christian church, if you look at church history, they have been fighting abortion from day one. Abortion has always been an issue. As long as people have existed, they have been irresponsible, having children and then killing the children because they didn't want to take care of them. And Christians in the early days of the church, they would fight abortion. We see this in one of the earliest church writings called the Didache. There was, instructions about abortion being a sin in there. In that day, the most common form of abortion was to basically have the baby and just leave it in the streets and let the dogs eat the child. And so Christians were known to wander the streets at night looking for the babies who were left to hopefully save them before they were killed by dogs. And so this is something the Christians have been fighting their whole lives. And you look at, from Genesis to Revelation, Satan's plan is always attack the babies. That's been his goal. He hates children, and for a guy who calls himself a pastor to support someone who, is for basically the modern equivalent of child sacrifice, he's totally unqualified to be a pastor. But the part that troubles me the most about this is the fact that J.D. Greear and Kevin Ezell both supported this guy. Again, that might be one of those things. They only met him in meetings, and so they didn't really know what he believed, and so he seemed like a nice guy. So, hey, we support him. But from the things I've heard from J.D. Greear, and I'm not so sure about Ezell, that's kind of the leaning he has as well. The Southern Baptist Church is in a very bad situation these days, and I've been a Southern Baptist most of my life. At this point in time, I'm not even sure I can say that I'm a Southern Baptist. I'm technically still a member of a Southern Baptist church, but when I go to, as many of you know, I live on the road. So whenever I come to settle down in one place and find a church, Southern Baptist isn't necessarily what I'm going to be looking for. I'm going to be looking for a good Reformed church. If it's Southern Baptist, yay, I'll go there. If not, no. The Southern Baptist Church has lost its way in the last few years. With that said, let's continue with John Harris's post. He continued, when Hayes was not approved by 19% of the congregation on the weekend of October 26 and 27, the leadership became furious. On October 31st, an open letter from the church ran in the biblical record which accused those who did not vote for Hayes of racial prejudices. And this is where I first heard about this story. I read this open letter. It was posted on Twitter. And my initial reaction was, they said that he was rejected for racial reasons. They didn't mention all this other stuff that I had just read. And so my initial reaction was, Naples is right. These guys were racist. They didn't vote for the guy because he was black. And so I was very ashamed and was like, we need to do some housekeeping in the Southern Baptist Convention. But then more details came out. John Harris continues, it further described them as disgruntled people who represent a sickness, cancer, and sin in the letter. The leadership asked for forgiveness to the Southern Baptist Convention for not receiving Hayes. Immediately, Bart Barber, Micah Fries, J.D. Greear, Wade Burleson, Benjamin Cole, Dwight McKissick, and Jack Graham echoed outrage towards dissenters for their racism. Though Hayes was a person of color, I couldn't find any evidence that the members harbored racist intent in voting. I wrote an email 2 weeks ago to the leadership of First Baptist Church Naples asking for clarification. I have not received a response. In the meantime, I have received an overwhelming evidence that the charge of racism was a lie. The church has now hired lawyers and issued cease and desist orders to former members. I wish I could go into all the crazy details regarding the things the leadership of FBC Naples has done to bully brothers and sisters in Christ whose only crime was voting their conscience. However, the reason I'm posting this update is because I do want you to know what's happening. We've heard stories like this coming from smaller churches, but they haven't gotten the press that First Baptist Church Naples is getting. And that's basically where he leaves off. What I would add is there was some details that I saw, and that was some really just nasty letters coming from the leadership of First Baptist Church Naples to members that they had kicked out of the church, and they were asking for clarification. Why are you kicking us out and all this stuff? And they basically, in short, told them, well, we're not your elders anymore. You're on church discipline. Get out. We don't want to talk to you basically anymore. Definitely not a Christ-like attitude, to say the least. By the way, John Harris is making a documentary on the subject of this First Baptist Church Naples situation, and he's raising money for that. So I'm going to leave a link in the description where you can give if you feel like that's something that you would like to see done. He's obviously going to dig up a lot more information on this subject than I will, and probably have a very well thought out view of it. Because, again, the narrative, it's not so much Christian gossip that we're engaging in here. If it was just to talk about the details of what was happening in Naples, then, yeah, to me that sounds kind of gossipy and we don't want to do it. But this is a national, big example of where the church has been going and how we can kind of stop it and help us to understand what church discipline is all about. So, yeah, definitely give to this if you feel led. Hopefully we'll get to see that documentary soon, and it'll be worth the time and money. But with that said, basically that's everything that he had to cover, and as I expected, it took a lot longer than I had hoped, and so I don't think I'll be able to get to the whole church discipline side of this thing today, so we're going to have to make this a two-parter. Part 1, just John Harris's analysis, and Part 2, you'll have to come back for next week in order to get what the Bible says about church discipline, and I'll try to tie it into First Baptist Church Naples and give us an idea of how they should have handled it. With that said, I would be not doing my job if I left you without giving you an opportunity to hear the gospel. So I'm going to leave a link in the description to a video that I did called What is the Gospel? And there, if you click on over to that, you will hear what the Bible is talking about when it refers to the gospel. And I pray that by the grace of God, you'll be saved today. And if you are a believer, that you'll still click over and see it and be strengthened, because we believers need to hear the gospel more, just as much as we did before we were saved. We need to be reminded of it daily. So with that said, God bless and have a great day. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please leave a comment and share and like the video as well. Also, feel free to subscribe so that you can keep up to date on the future videos that I'll be sharing here as well. If you'd like to support this ministry, you can through the PayPal and Patreon links below. And if you have any prayer requests, questions, or maybe some ideas for videos in the future, please send them to the email address that I have linked below as well. And lastly, don't forget to check out the links below to find resources that'll help you to further your study. God bless and have a great day.